very good morning to you all. It is exactly 9 o'clock according to my watch. I'd like to welcome you all to this Parliamentary Oversight Committee meeting. It is the 9th of March 2021. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to members of this committee, as well as the parliamentary officials in attendance, the Speaker and the Secretary and officials present to this meeting, in which we will be dealing with the second and third quarterly performance and financial reports. Do we have any apologies tabled for this meeting? I have received none.
Chairperson, nothing from our side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davids. Mr. Davids is our procedural officer who is assisting this committee. Thank you. If there are no further apologies, then we'll commence with the meeting. I'm just going to start as usual with the rules of engagement for virtual meetings. All participants are muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid background noises. If there are any points of order to be flagged, please use the raise hand function or by indicating so in the chat function of the platform. We ask that videos and audios be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. However, if you are presenting or speaking, please do feel free to use your camera and of course turn on your microphone. We ask that videos and microphones be turned off once you've concluded your inputs. The maintenance of order for this meeting come from the directives for sittings of the House and meetings of committees as ATC'd on Friday, the 17th of April 2020. So this morning we'll be hearing from the institution of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament on the second and third quarterly performance reports for the 2020 and 2021 financial year, as well as the second and third quarterly financial statements for the 2021 financial year, as well as feedback on any instructions issued in terms of Section 37.6 and Section 66.2 of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. So on that note, I'm going to extend a very warm welcome to the Speaker and like to ask if you'd like to make any inputs or introductory remarks. Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning and thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. I would like to really appreciate the opportunity given to us as the Provincial Parliament and the administration. Of course, this is one thing that honourable members, we always take serious, because it is important for us to account. Not only do we think our role is to account here, but it's just to ensure that regularly we update you and also take some suggestions and advice, not only because it is legislated. I think it is the right thing to do because we're using public funds. So we appreciate your frankness when we engage on these issues. Just know that there's nothing that is hidden in the report. Everything is in the open, and everything that we're presenting here, it is the correct state of affairs given the financial and non-financial reporting that we'll be giving, both on the second and the third quarter. So I would like to really, at this point, extend my appreciation to the parliamentary administration led by the Secretary to Parliament, Mr. Romeo Adams, and of course the support from the Office of the Speaker on a continuous basis. I want to, at this stage, Honourable Chairperson and the honourable members, allow the Secretary to introduce his team.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Adams, and to the management team of the WCPP.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Speaker, and good morning, honourable members and colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chairperson, to brief the committee on the Quarter 2 and Quarter 3 matters. Maybe just when we get to item number 2, 2.1, the presentations on the second and the third quarter as they relate to performance will be done by Ms. Ackham. The matter of the second and the third quarterly financial statements will be done by Mr. Jawuddin, and the CFO and the Secretary will attend to 2.3. Chairperson, in the meeting we have the Director responsible for institutional enablement, Mr. Titus. We have the Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Peterson. We have the Director responsible for PEO, Ms. Fushia, and then we also have managers in the administration, and the support managers in the Office of the Speaker would also be assisting in responding to detailed and specific operational questions that may come from the committee as it relates to the quarterly performance and also the finances. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. I think we can proceed directly to those presentations.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Akem will do the first presentation on performance management.
Good morning, Chairperson. Thank you, members.
Thanks. All right.
I will be dealing with the second and third quarter performance information. Before I head there, I just want to touch on the revisions that were approved by the Speaker last year in November, revisions to the 2020-21 APP. It was tabled in November and a copy of the changes was submitted to the POC. Essentially, the programs that were changed was in Program 2, Parliamentary Support Services, and Program 3, which is public engagement. So if I run down through the sub-programs that where the performance indicators were changed, the first one is plenary support. The first one there was compile and publish the digest of rulings. Due to an administrative thought that because of COVID-19, we thought that because you can't physically publish the books, we would distribute the digest of rulings to the members electronically. So that was the change that took place there. In terms of Sergeant at Arms, percentage verification and processing of visitors in the VMS system. The change there is because of the lockdown and we couldn't access the building. This normal process could not take place, and therefore we replaced it with a percentage of visitors processed and overall compliance with the applicable COVID-19 regulations. Moving on to the second part in plenary support, percentage increase of ATCs available within the agreed time frame according to SOP. While implementing the APP, we found that the performance indicator needs to change. So through an administrative error, we found it necessary to change it to the percentage of ATCs published within the agreed time frame in accordance with the SOP, because the receiving of documents from departments is not in the control of the administration, and therefore we can't guarantee a percentage increase in the number of documents that come to the legislature for tabling. And the last part in parliamentary support services, I think we went on this one. Okay, public engagement, stakeholder management and communication services. Because of the lockdown and the ban on international travel, we could not approve the international relations framework as it was planned in the first quarter and roll it out to the second, third, and fourth quarter. So we changed this to an annual target where we approve the international relations framework and then implement it in the 21-22 financial year. In the last part, in public engagement and outreach, the constituency programs were planned to be approved also in the first quarter and rolled out in the second, third, and fourth. Again, here, because of COVID-19, we deemed it to have it approved in the fourth quarter and rolled out in the 21-22 financial year. And we also changed the name of the program from constituency programs to WCPP Engage. There is a further change to this, which will be reflected in the new financial year, and it will be changed to Tetna Nati program. So these revisions came into effect from the third quarter on. So in terms of the second quarter, it will still be reported on the old performance indicators, and then from the third quarter is where the change comes into effect. So moving on to the quarter performance information per program, we start off with quarter 2. This is just a high-level summary just to indicate the targets that were achieved, not achieved, and what was applicable. Later in the slides, I will emphasize the information in the not achieved and not applicable. So for program 1, government, leadership and administration, there were 1 target that was planned and that target was achieved. In program 2, parliamentary support, there was 8 targets planned for the second quarter, 6 were achieved, 1 not achieved, and 1 was not applicable. In public engagement, there was 3 planned, 1 not achieved, 2 applicable. And in member support, there was 2 planned and both was achieved. This equates to a 64% achievement on the second quarter. In terms of the third quarter, under program 1, there was 2 planned and 2 was achieved. In parliamentary support service, there was 10 planned, 9 achieved, 1 not achieved. In public engagement, there was 1 planned and 1 was partially achieved. And then in member support, there was 2 planned and 2 was achieved. Here, the overall achievement was 87%. You can actually see the impact now of the revisions that were done and the targets were able to be achieved. Okay, moving on to information per sub-program level within the quarter, the quarters 2 and 3 is combined. So under Office of the Speaker and Office of the Secretary, there was no second and third quarters. They have mostly targets for the fourth quarter. Financial management, there was 3 targets planned for both quarters and 3 was achieved. So overall for program 1, all the targets were achieved that was planned for. In program 2, for quarters 2 and 3, in plenary support, there was 4, 3 was achieved and 1 was not achieved. Committee support, 4 planned, 4 achieved. Under Hansard services, 2 planned, 2 was achieved. And under the Sergeant at Arms, 8 was planned, 6 achieved, 1 not achieved, and 1 not applicable. And then in the last program, third program, public engagement, stakeholder management and communication, 2 planned, 1 not achieved, 1 not applicable. And in public education and outreach, there was 2 planned for the 2 quarters, 1 partially achieved and 1 not applicable. And then finally in the last program, enabling allowances, the political party support for secretarial and constituency allowances, both was achieved. So moving on to the deviations, I will do the quarter separate. So I'll do quarter 2 first. So the first deviation was in plenary support and related to the procedural related capacity building sessions. There was 1 plan for the second quarter. It wasn't achieved because of the situation that we were in terms of the lockdown. There was an opportunity for face-to-face interaction with the members to do this kind of training. A remedial action was put in place where we offered to do one-on-one sessions with them. And then just a status as it is currently, we caught up with that target. We were able to catch up with both targets in the third quarter. Sergeant at Arms, the percentage verification and processing visitors in the VMS system, we recorded this as not applicable because this was one of the targets that was revised in November, and therefore we could not do it the way it was originally planned. But going forward in the third quarter, we have achieved all that requirements of that target. And moving on to stakeholder management and communication services, number of international relations or protocol training or briefing sessions held with members of staff. 1 was planned for the second quarter. Once again, with the situation that we were in with the COVID, we couldn't have the sessions, and there was very few service providers that can actually provide us with the online training for protocol. But later in the year, DIRCO came back to us, and they were able to do the training for us in October, and we did it for members and staff. So this target year was caught up also in the third quarter. And then moving to stakeholder management, once again, the international relations policy. This is reported as not applicable because it was revised in the revisions that were done in November, and the policy was subsequently approved. And moving to public education and outreach, this is once again the constituency program, and again the same reasons, not applicable, and it was approved as well in the third quarter. So all these things that was revised in the in November for once-off approval, the implementation of that will then carry forth in the 21-22 financial year. Okay, moving on to quarter 3 deviations. The first one there is in the sub-program Sergeant at Arms. It relates to the number of planned evacuation exercises completed. As you know, in December, and due to the resurgence of COVID, the legislature building closed early on the, I think we closed around about the 14th of December. So we were not able to do the fire drill in the third quarter, but plans are in place to do the fire drill in the fourth quarter. Public education and outreach. The developer maintain a stakeholder database to ensure targeted stakeholder engagement. This target couldn't be achieved in the third quarter due to challenges in the procurement process relating to the quotations, but this approval was given in February 21, so we caught up with the stock. That's the last target. So if there's any questions from the committee, I will be able to answer. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you kindly, Ms. Akam. I'd just like to recognize the Deputy Speaker who joined just as you started your presentation. So we'd like to extend a warm welcome to Hon. Schaefer.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member.
All right, members, are there any questions on this presentation? If you'd use the raise hand function. Honourable Mackenzie, let's start with you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, can we go to slide 3 of this presentation? It'll be easier just to do it this way. Slide 3, sorry, number 4, page number 4, if you don't mind. Thank you. Under the IR policy strategy and implementation, one can understand the international travel with a ban. We all know what happened, but I just don't seem to understand, and it's also linked to slide number 13 of this particular matter. I don't understand why the framework was not done. It says replace the international framework, the rollout has been will commence. So I can just get an understanding as to why the framework was not done, if my reading for that, because the plan has been really changed with the framework, and then the reason is the ban international framework, etc. And that also linked to slide number 13, 14 on the same 13 on the same matter. And then the second question is on page number 5, which is the next page on here. When we're talking about the constituency program, which is now the WCPP Engage program, where are we now with this program, seeing that we're now on level 1? And because obviously it says now they're going to, there's no, sorry, it says now there will be no quarterly reports on the implementation. We're now on level 1, and when is this program going to start between working with the members and their constituency? And then on slide number 12, 2.2.2, and refer to 2.2.2 on page 3 on the WCC squidgy. And one of the reasons here, it says it were offered to members and staff during quarter 2, then no responses were received. And it looks like I'm also one of those guilty parties. But how was this reach out, if you say that no responses received from anyone on this particular matter? And then on the page number 13, when on the quarter 1 where we didn't, it says there one of the reasons challenges were experienced in identifying suitable training providers. How do we select training providers? Because I just cannot, given the shortage of opportunities out there, and small business complaining they don't get business, and I find it difficult that no one bothered to even trying to provide the service. Is there no accredited program? I'm just trying to get an understanding here. How do we identify potential suppliers? And people out there complaining all the time, there's no business, and here we're sitting where there were no suitable service providers. Is it because they were accredited? Were they not skilled? we can just get more details on this. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. I now see Honourable Allen.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Please allow me to leave my video off. My internet is unstable, but if you are able to hear me in terms of slide number 3, firstly, to make a comment, I am delighted by the fact that we have been able to receive copies electronically, which made it easier during the lockdown. So well done to the WCPP on that, in that we've been able to get our documents and any reports via email. But secondly, I am partly covered by by slide number 12, as per Member Mackenzie, but I wanted to double check in terms of the virtual capacity sessions that were offered, whether we have undertaken any surveys in that regard to understand why people potentially did not reply, but also if the needs were actually what people wanted, especially from the staffing side. If I can just get an understanding on that. But I'm glad that an additional session was took place in order to make up for that target. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Allen. Then if I could then just conclude the round of questions. Mine is on slide or page number 14 for the public education and outreach. It says there that the constituency programs approved and implemented to establish relationship between members and their constituents. And I see that it has been achieved and it will commence rollout at the start of the financial year. I'd just like to ask whether this was consulted with members and to try and understand what is the issue with the relationship between members and their constituents. And has this been circulated, and are members now, are there targets now set for members in their constituency? I don't see any further hands unless Honourable Mackenzie, is that a further question?
Yes, Chairperson. Sorry, I just might see my notes. There's one question I wanted to ask, if I may.
Yes, please, go ahead.
On the international relations, let's just ignore the framework for a second. A lot of the organizations we do pay, and I was privileged enough to attend the conference on Botswana 2 years ago with assistance of Parliament. But we do pay these organizations subscription fees, and I just want to get an understanding, was there any virtual conferences offered or virtual engagements offered? Because the fees are still being paid, and what service are we getting from these organizations that we belong to? If it's not under this particular program, which I think it is, then I'll obviously answer that question later on. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Honourable Mitchell, we'll take questions from you and then we'll conclude this round. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Chair. I just want to latch on to the point raised by you. And I just wanted to ask the performance indicator. Initially, was there any, what's the background to that? Because was there any request from members of the public? Was there a request from members of Parliament for this indicator to be incorporated? And then also with regards to the rollout, is it possible that we could see the proposed rollout plan?
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell. I'm not sure if you'd like to start, Mr. Speaker or Madam Deputy Speaker, or if we'll hand straight over to the Secretary.
The Secretary, Chairperson, will attend to this. We'll just add if there are some areas that needs attention.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I see that all of the questions that have been posed by the honourable members refers to the area that Ms. Fouchier is responsible for. So I'm going to allow, if in order, Ms. Fouchier an opportunity first, and then I'll augment, if needed, responses. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Fouchier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, as we were going through the questions, I was saying you're cool, all focusing very clearly on public engagement. I'm going to start. I'm going to try and answer it in the order that it was asked. There are some questions that relate to one another, so I might be answering some questions that were asked later on by my earlier responses. The first question related to the international relations policy and framework. If I can just clarify for the member, the part that was adjusted was the rollout. So the IR policy approval and the framework that we did for the current financial year was achieved. It is just the rollout that we couldn't do in the financial year due to the ban on travel. In terms of the subscription and the virtual sessions, the member Mackenzie is 100% correct. We did not get any rebate on our subscription fees for the year, but there were virtual sessions. There was an NCSL boot camp, there were virtual CPA meetings. So engagements did take place, albeit not physical, and included travel abroad. Then in terms of the constituency program has now been renamed twice. It started off as the constituency program, and the idea behind it stemmed from the vision of WCPP to be a parliament in touch with its people. The idea is to take parliament to the people and to, during constituency periods, go to various constituency areas and introduce them to the members of parliament. So it would be a program where the public engagement team goes out to a specific committee, constituency area, and have sessions with members of the public to show to them who are the members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, and then specifically who are the members that service that constituency, just to introduce the members to the public. And then we will combine that obviously with PEO activities such as workshops. There was no issue regarding the constituency work of members, or that we felt that members weren't doing what they should. I mean, that is absolutely none of our business, and it's not in our realm of control. What we are trying to do purely is to take Parliament to the people and to introduce the members of Parliament to the Western Cape. We will go through all the constituencies. Honourable Mitchell has asked for a program. We can definitely make that available. We are planning to, within this parliamentary term, within the sixth Parliament, to reach all of the constituency areas. So we will break into teams of 4, the public engagement and outreach team, and we will go to various places throughout the province during WCPP constituency periods. Then in terms of the international relations training service provider, normally we do our international relations and protocol training through DIRCO. That way we just get uniformity, so that everyone has got the same training, and we know that it is sanctioned by and in line with our government policies. Unfortunately, DIRCO indicated that they were not able to do the training for us in the financial year. We then had to go out through our procurement system to source a service provider. That is not easy, Mr. Mackenzie, because we have to go to people that are on the Western Cape supplier database. We cannot just randomly place an advert in the newspaper. There are also very few companies that are skilled or specializes in international relations and protocol training. There are very, very few, and we were not able to source a service provider that met the specifications. Luckily for us, DIRCO came back to say that they could now accommodate us for a virtual session, and we therefore had the international relations and protocol training with DIRCO. I think, Madam Chair, that I've covered all the questions. It was the IR policy and the framework, which I indicated was done. It just couldn't be rolled out. Teta Nati, that started off as the constituency program. And it will be, to answer Mr. McKenzie, I know that we're in level 1 at the moment, but it is planned to be rolled out from the beginning of this financial year. So from April, the first constituency period, we will roll out. I think I covered the Chair's question regarding the reason for the program and Honourable Mitchell's request for the program. And then the subscriptions and the virtual sessions in terms of international relations. If you're satisfied that I have covered everything, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Ms. Forshire for her responses. Maybe just on slide 12, there was a question under the plenary support. The indicator there was the number of procedurally related capacity building sessions with members and or staff. So Chairperson, the need for this type of training is identified when, for example, questions for oral reply, questions for written reply in the sitting itself, the matter of motions with notice and motions without notice are submitted by members and or their officers, and Mr. Pochenpoel and his team had then felt it necessary from the products that we received, maybe just especially with the new parties, to offer their services to assist the parties and the members with writing those type of procedural matters for the House. And that is actually what is referred to under that question or under that specific item. I think it was a question from Honourable McKenzie as it relates to that. Why was it not offered? How was the need identified? And I think those were the questions that were asked. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, would you like to add anything at this stage?
Chairperson, if I may, I think on the question of international relations, there is something that I wanted to highlight. I'm not sure whether the Deputy Speaker is here, because if she's able to come in, we did have a conference, which I think it's better to appraise the members. But one of my concerns is that when we accommodate a diverse pool of members in terms of the representation of parties, there seems to be a lack of interest, even though members would initially indicate that they are attending. But the conference itself, you find that members are not there. So we don't understand some of the salient issues that could be challenging in that area. But I think it's something that we'll have to address with the political party leadership in order to ensure that those kind of tendencies do not become a norm. Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Speaker, thanks very much. Yes, I suppose because we're probably Zoomed fatigued, and we usually used to engaging internationally in a person-to-person space. But I think it's very important that we do adapt to online international meetings. And I think what I've found really is that it has been much more effective through being able to network and the people to get to know you, because you're constantly attending these meetings. So, while you might only have one trip in a year, you can have constant engagement. And I've been doing so with the Commonwealth Parliament. So I think it's very helpful if members could actually make a little bit of effort to be more proactive in the international invites that we get online. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I think there might be some follow-up questions. I see Honourable Mackenzie's hand.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just two follow-up questions. One, just on the Secretary's answers, thank you for that. If we can get perhaps, and I can only speak for myself, on the training sessions on the motions and the questions, because I might have missed it, because it's not only for new members. I've been around for 7 years now, and I still struggle at sometimes to phrase some of these things properly. So I would like to attend those as well, and I probably missed it. That's why I didn't respond. So if we can get those again, please, going forward. And then on the rollout under international engagements on the framework, and I now understand the difference. Thank you, Mr. Bashir. What was the rollout supposed to be? Because it helped me understand what was achieved and what not achieved. If we can just get clear on that international rollout, except for the international travel, because I presume there were other parts that were supposed to be done. And then on the, you indicated that you couldn't get a supply because they were not in the supply database, and one can understand that. And then on another question, and perhaps finance can answer that, how or when do we train suppliers to become Western Cape supplier compliant, if you like? Because if they're not in a supplier database, maybe they can provide the service, but somebody needs to train them. And where that service can advertise, so I can, for example, forward it to my constituents and say, hey, you need to be trained on how to become a Western Cape supplier database. And then on the constituency program, if you can just share that with us, and when you say starting in the new year, so that I know if you do come to Mitchell's Plain, for example, when you're coming, what is going to be, and what is the detail of the program. If you can share that program with us so we know what's going to be discussed on that program. And that's all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie.
Oh, sorry, Chair, one more.
Oh, yes, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, one more question. Thank you to the Deputy Speaker on the international engagements, but where do we see it? Where does it get posted on Parliament's website? Previously, before COVID, there was various emails that go around and we could see there's international engagements, but I can't remember seeing from the email on these other virtual sessions that are taking place. If you want to attend, please let us know. On the other side, if I do see something, yes, from the outside that is not via Parliament, I definitely will send it through to your office for consideration. But I know the organizations that we subscribe to and pay fees for, those are the engagement or the conferences or events I would like to see, so I can participate in them because Parliament do pay for it. And then this a question on that, are we paying less fees? Again, possibly in the finance section, I can deal with those questions about the finance, because if you're not participating physically, one would presume that the fee cost will be much less. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. I also have some follow-up questions, please. So the first is then on that constituency program. I'd like to just understand how constituencies are then defined, because we don't have legally defined constituencies in the Western Cape, and each political party has a different demarcation for their constituencies. And for example, smaller parties, the whole province is their constituency. So how have you gone about determining geographically what a constituency means in order to roll out this program? That's my first question. And then the second is on the CPA. There must be some issue with receiving those invitations, because I certainly haven't received any. I've only received from the Commonwealth Women's Parliament, and I've only received 2 communications in the last year on that. So could we just understand what is the flow of those invitations? Do they send them directly? Do we need to apply to be on a database to receive those invitations? Or how can we get involved in those programs? Thank you. That's it from me. Are there any further final questions in these follow-ups from other members? None? All right. Then I'll hand over to the Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. Again, I'm going to ask Ms. Fouchier just to respond to those that she can, and then the CFO on the supplier database, and then I'll augment if and when necessary. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to start with the Teta Nati program. I think the reason why it was changed from our original idea of a constituency program to WCPP Engage and then to Teta Nati is exactly the question that the chairperson posed, that we cannot define a constituency. So what we would do, and I think that links to Mr. Mackenzie's plan as well, is that we will make the program available to members. We will take it to Programming Authority. so that it could also from there be disseminated to the various political parties. And we focused on districts and then tried to break it down into sub-districts. So when I spoke earlier about the 4 PEO teams that will go into the province in a constituency period, we will, for instance, start at the Beto area and do Garden Route Beto in the same trip, so that we can spend 2 days in specific towns, and we will then obviously invite people from the surrounding areas to come. So the idea is no longer that it focuses on a specific constituency, but that over the 5 years we try to cover the entire province and all the districts in the province. And we will invite all the members that are there to come in person if they would want to. But we would essentially do a presentation about all the members of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, a bit of their bio, a bit of their specialty areas, their role in WCPP, such as chairpersons of committees or serving on committees, and then particularly highlight in this area, these are the people that you could contact if you want to make contact with your political party, and introduce them to the members that's responsible for that area. And yes, you're 100% correct, Madam Chair. For the smaller parties, it would be the same member, irrespective of where we go in the Western Cape. Then that was the plan. The name change in terms of international relations and the CPA notifications. I'm going to have to get back to the honourable member on that question, unless the Deputy Speaker maybe can augment on that. And I will have to check with the CPA on how they notify people of events. We get notified through the stakeholder management and communications team of conferences that's now taking place virtually, where we could send delegates, and that would be the process that we follow in terms of the international relations policy, where the Deputy Speaker, as the delegated authority by the Speaker, would liaise with the different political parties and the Chief Whip on who would be members that will form the delegation. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Chairperson, if I may. I see Mr. Adams and Ms. Peterson would like to make contributions.
Chairperson, Ms. Peterson can go first, ma'am. It's in order.
Thank you. Ms. Peterson, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary. Good morning, everybody. Just on the question of the Western Cape Supplier Database, Provincial Treasury does have training to suppliers who want to join it, as well as the Office of the Chief Procurement Office for the Central Supplier Database of the country. They do sort of have road shows, and that I think it may have been limited during the time of lockdown. And then they also have information on their websites on how to register on the databases. Just also on the question of the CPA fees, we've paid our branch fees in full, but when there are conferences or seminars or events that we attend, there are also separate registration fees for those specific things. So we have paid our branch fees and so forth, but we haven't paid any conference specific or event registration fees during this year.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, maybe just to respond to 2 matters. Honourable Mackenzie, maybe we could do it through Ms. Foucher's Directorate, the Parliamentary Support Services. Maybe just inform all of the parties of the capacity building that is available again through the plenary support services, and then those could then be scheduled accordingly. That's number 1. Number 2, Chairperson, with regards to the fees, and thank you to the CFO for responding. There are membership fees, and then there are conferences or training fees. Now membership fees would be a standard, and like the CFO had indicated, the WCPP had already paid for that. For conferences, there could then be an additional fee, and in most events, there is then a discount that is issued or that is considered for members of the institution, as opposed to those who would like to attend who are not members of that specific collective. With regards to the selection of delegates attending those sessions, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament is a branch of the CPA. The CPA then, when they are facilitating, whether it's training or international events and those type of matters, they then communicate through the branches. The speaker is the chairperson of the WCP branch, the deputy speaker is the deputy chairperson, and the secretary is the secretary of the branch, and that is where the communication is then directed to. The secretary is responsible for delegates of officials from the administration that could be considered to attend those areas. The office of the speaker through the deputy speaker is then responsible for engaging members and political parties, and then the forwarding of names of members who will be attending those sessions. Previously, before COVID-19, the costing or the budget that was assigned to each of the intended international engagements, because CPA Africa is an annual engagement, CPC International is also an annual engagement, and then there are one or two others, for example, the NCLS that the WCPP has also been sending delegates to on an annual basis. The number of delegates is then based on what are the resources available to attend those engagements, whether it be CPA Africa, CPC, or the NCSL specifically. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I think that's all questions answered. Honourable Mackenzie, is there one outstanding from you?
Oh, no, Chairperson, I thought you were going to open for another round. You're going to close the questions now.
Yes, well, I mean, I think if you've got a burning question, please proceed, and then we'll move on to the next presentation thereafter.
Thank you, Chair. Just on one point, on the public engagements going forward, if I may, because, for example, the Standing Committee and the Premier is going to the same area that Mrs. Fouché mentioned now. That's also important for us to get a program. So when the committee goes there on public hearings, it'd be nice that perhaps working with public outreach, they can work with the communities to partake in those public hearings. So it would be nice to get a program from Ms. Fouché so we know where we can also direct our training facilities to. And then just a last point, if we can get a list of those conferences and invitees or invitations that went out for the last year from international relations, it would just be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. I think those are more comments. And then we'll just add that request when we do our deliberations at the end of the meeting. All right, let's then move on to the next presentation, please.
Good morning, Chair. So Mr. Jawuddin will be doing this presentation on the financial matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Jawuddin.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Secretary and members. I'll be presenting the second and third quarter IYM expenditure for WCPP. Can everybody see my presentation? My screen, sorry.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Just with regards to the second quarter and third quarter, I've combined the second and third quarter into one presentation. So specifically with regards to the results of the second and third quarter, as you can see from the presentation, that at the end of the second quarter, which is the end of as of the 30th of September 2020, we have spent 50% of our budget of our 211,957,000 of our budget. In the then we obviously went through an adjustments process where we paid over or surrendered some of our underspending to provincial treasury in adjustments estimates. So our adjusted budget was then 203,676,000. But specifically with regards to the expenditure, as I reported on the first quarter, 2021 was a very unique year in the sense that expenditure was very slow, and that's in direct relation to the pandemic and COVID-19. Particularly in the first quarter and moving into the second quarter, committee activity as well as expenditure, for example, in public education and outreach was very slow because of the fact that we moved to a work from home process, and the hard lockdown affected our normal operations and what we would normally have spent on. So that's a specific note I would like to make because of the fact that that would have been it affected our expenditure from what it would normally have been, and that is something I would like to make note of. If I look at program 1 specifically, in program 1, as at the end of the second quarter, we spent 39% of our budget, and at the end of the second quarter, sorry, at the end of the second quarter, we spent 39% of our budget, and at the end of the third quarter, which is the end of December, we spent 66% of the budget. That does look as, that basically is in direct relation to what I said specifically. The reason for the slower than normal expenditures, if I can say, just to touch on four main items, is the slower than anticipated filling on vacant posts. We planned to fill quite a few posts at the beginning of the financial year, but because of the fact we went into a hard lockdown and the pandemic, the filling of those vacant posts took longer than anticipated. Expenditure specifically with regards to our normal expenditure had slowed down because of the pandemic, and as well as the fact that, if I can touch, for example, on Office of the Speaker, we see a percentage of 35% and 60%. That would be quite low for what would normally have been. But the reason for that specifically is the fact that during the financial year, and particularly from April, the invoices we receive for GMT for the kilometer and daily tariffs we normally pay for the GMT vehicles, what we had on our records did not correspond to the invoices we received from GMT. So there were invoices in dispute for more than 6 months. Those invoices were communicated to GMT, and there was quite a lengthy process in trying to resolve our records with GMT's record, and that invoices were only paid towards the end of December, and the majority of that in January, which is now in the fourth quarter. That is in direct relation to the bottom where we see a logistical service as well, because in Office of the Speaker, that's the vehicles in the Office of the Speaker, and then administration vehicles would be in logistical services. So that is in direct relation to the fact that the GMT invoices were in dispute, as well as there was vacant posts. So the majority of the underspending here would be vacant posts, as well as in HR, there's vacant posts, as well as training interventions which was planned, but it took place later in the financial year. Also, program 2, this is mainly the less than anticipated expenditure of 35% in September is primarily due to the later than anticipated filling of vacant posts. And as we can see with regards to standing committees, that percentage is quite low, and that is also in direct relation to the effect of the pandemic. The committee activities in the first and second quarter was quite slow. However, that did pick up towards the end of the financial year, and we can see the big jump in the third quarter because the activity did specifically pick up. That's in the same correlation with our Ansart services as well. If I then go to program 3, if I look at program 3, there again the main reason for the less than anticipated expenditure is, again, like I mentioned earlier, we look at public and education outreach. Because of the pandemic, our processes and education outreach programs were limited because of the fact that we were in a hard lockdown and couldn't go out to the community specifically for that. So that's the main reason for the lower than anticipated expenditure in that program as well. Program 4, the reason for, even though this percentage looks higher than the other programs, what we need to take into account that the sub-program or this program includes a secretarial and constituency allowance. So obviously, as at the end of September, we would have paid all the political parties up until the end of the third quarter of their allowances, whereas at the end of December, we would have paid all the parties' allowances up until the end of the financial year. But because we paid in advance, this percentage is closer to obviously 100% because we paid all the political parties' fourth quarter allowances by the end of December. With regards to allowances and contributions, but that's particularly because of the fact that we went on lockdown and the pandemic had an effect on the spend of that. And then with regards to members' administration, the vacancy within that sub-program, which is in the process of being filled, is the result of that low expenditure. Program 5 is direct charges, and that's basically member salaries which are paid as per the norm. That's basically a summary of the second and third quarter IYM. Not sure if there's any questions. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jawadin. I see Honourable Mackenzie has a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I just wanted to get an understanding on our administration costs, and perhaps the most obvious one for where we're in. If the CFO can just share with us, obviously a significant amount of people were not in the building during the various stages of lockdown, level 5, level 4, and level 3. In your budget, which I can't see, is probably in under one of the subline. What sort of was our cost in reduction when it comes to hot and electricity and security costs related to our space in 7 Wales Street? And then we're now on the 9th of March, and a lot of the funds we're not going to spend by the end of this month. Given where we are, particularly when it comes to constituency enablement and community outreaches and many of the things that we can contribute. One, I have to thank the speaker for the increase in disaster management funding for events. And perhaps this question should be to the speaker. Has there been consideration, as opposed to giving some of this funding back to provincial treasury or to the provincial revenue fund? And I don't know, I haven't seen any indication of a planning stage from the CFO as to what percentage of the money is going to go back. We're now on the 9th of March. Is there any consideration, Speaker, to give additional monies for disaster management funds going forward, and also for the new financial year, given that we are looking at a third wave, which in all accounts internationally will be much bigger than the second wave, to continue with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. If I may ask a question, and it's related. Obviously, the last year has been a very unusual one, given that we've been in a pandemic and we had to very quickly change the way in which we conduct our business. And again, the WCPP deserves tremendous accolades for the way in which our Parliament went virtual so quickly and so successfully. My question then isn't on the quarterly financials per se, but moving forward, given that we'll probably be in this new mode of working for at least another year, but how do we then protect the budget beyond that, beyond the pandemic? Because we might make certain savings in these 2 years, but beyond that, we might find ourselves in a situation where we go back to how we were conducting our business then. But, if our budgets are then transformed to deal with the current pandemic situation, can we shift back if necessary? I'm sure that it would be good practice to keep some of the lessons and technologies that we have adopted beyond COVID, but there will again be another shift, and will the institution be able to shift with that, I suppose, is my question. Are there any other questions from members on the financial reporting?
So,
Honourable
Chair,
Mackenzie?
my last 2 questions and I'm done.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. A lot of companies and organizations are now spending money on training and development because people don't travel as much, people have more time on their hands. Has there been, from Parliament's side, sort of from the training and development section, let's call it that, and I do appreciate the training that was done by the National School of Government the other day, to look at redirecting some money, which is as opposed to giving it back to a provincial revenue fund and rolling it over into funding post graduate studies, and this is not the LLS training I'm talking about bursaries for members of Parliament or for individuals in Parliament that want to study to become better public reps. And where does that policy decision making sit? Is it the Speaker must make the decision? Is there training and development? And how do members of Parliament ask Parliament to start doing that without it interfering in the work of Parliament? Because that's a very important line that we should not thread. But it is important for better public servants that whatever training members of Parliament do, they become better public servants, and ultimately Parliament functions better. And then the second training, when it comes to tools of trade, and we know the 100,000 enabling story, I've been around 6 years, so I know that. What can Parliament do in betterment? For example, the City of Cape Town has provided headsets and all those things, because working from home is not a and it's also applicable to staff members in Parliament. Working from home, despite what people think, is not an easy thing. I mean, I can show you around here. I bought a nice light the other day because the lighting is terrible from the, simple things like that to help us to become better public servants, which the community ultimately better. Has there been some thinking around the finance team to look at the IT team to look at technologies that can make members function better to enable better serve the public, as opposed to each member purchasing his own individual item, which becomes more expensive, where Parliament, which Parliament buys stuff, it just becomes much cheaper in the economies of scale. Has there been thinking around that, and how can that happen going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. And then Honourable Mitchell, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to ask with regards to the allowances to political parties, so the secretarial and constituency allowances, when will that be communicated to political parties? And yeah, and if I get an answer, then I'll have a follow-up. If I'm answered, then yeah, then there's no need for a follow-up.
Thank you very much. I saw the Secretary's hand a little earlier, so I'll hand over to you, Mr. Secretary. Please proceed. Mr. Adams, over to you.
Apologies, Chairperson, problem between the screen and the Chair. Chairperson, I was covered with some of the follow-up questions and comments that were made by the honourable members. The questions that were asked are for responses for the CFO, but also for Mr. Titus from the bursary and the training part, and then I'll also augment because there's one or two statements that I would also like to respond to. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Ms. Peterson, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just with regards to water and electricity, we're a tenant in the building, so we don't actually spend anything on water and electricity and security. In terms of we might have spent a little bit less on buying paper and printer cartridges and so forth with people being out of the office, but not on our actual infrastructure. With regards to giving, returning money to the Provincial Revenue Fund in the adjustments estimate process, which we have tabled with POC as well, we did actually give some money back to the Provincial Treasury. We weren't able to accommodate as much as they asked for, but in negotiations with them, we did look at our budget and we did provide something back to the fiscus, which was around about in the region of 12% of the budget. Then just also with the money given back, we do keep our own funding, so our underspending isn't returned to the Provincial Treasury, but we do discuss it with them. Going forward into the MTEF, there is quite a bit of pressure on the budget, especially in the middle year of the MTEF. So our underspending this year, we would look most likely at supplementing that middle year if Provincial Treasury can't actually afford to give us more. So as we're going through a financial year, we're always looking at forward at our budget requirements in year 1, 2, and 3 of the MTEF to see how we can accommodate it and what we underspend in a year. Generally, we use to supplement our budget in future years. Training and development, I think Mr. Titus would be able to give some more feedback there, as well as on considering the tools of trade for the members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Titus, good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Chair, just to say, with regard to the capacity building program for members, I think the Honourable Mackenzie's question around whether there is thinking, long-term thinking for capacity building for members as well as staff, that is indeed the case. Currently, Chair, the Deputy Speaker leads on behalf of the Office of the Speaker all issues pertaining to training, as members are aware. In the past, we used to have conversations with leaders of parties. And I think this has been convened with regard to the needs of members, not only currently, but beyond this particular term. So there is commitment to long-term capacity building for members beyond the term of office. I think what is important also to mention is that we are in constant conversation around how we build this further, how we deal with this going beyond just the short training programs. We've had conversation, as you would know, that within the administration we have a support program that looks at study assistance for staff, and that is directly attached to the permanency that staff have. We have had requests, Chairperson, for members to have more long-term training and bursaries in that regard. There's been negative decisions on the part of the administration. Currently, the policy does not allow for long-term bursaries, and so it's a policy decision pertaining to bursaries or support, long-term support for members' studies in that regard. I am aware that there are members of Parliament who are currently undertaking study commitments long-term, which they are paying out of their pocket currently. So the decision pertaining to that is a conversation that will affect, I suppose, a policy decision long-term. We have spoken about to a particular member who had asked about the risks pertaining to long-term study currently. So I'm assuming, Chair, that the question was more related to members itself and not to staff. So I think I've covered that particular area. With regard to the tools of trade, with your indulgence, I'll ask Mr. Skriker to just provide some of the current thinking, the technologies that the Honourable Mackenzie had raised, and what our current thinking is with regard to tools of trade, and what is possible, what is feasible, and what is not feasible at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Skriker, would you like to make some inputs now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to do so. Chair, yes, our thinking around the tools of trade. First of all, I'd just like to comment that the existing hardware is touchscreen, but it only utilizes what we call capacitive touch, which is similar to using your finger when you draw something on an iPad or some tablet device. So it cannot take what we call a digital pen input to mark up specific documents. However, having said that, we have found that the Adobe tool set, the free tool set, does allow you markup of these documents and commenting of these documents without having any special type of pen input to do so. So that's, as long as we stick to Adobe as a standard, we should be able to comment on documents without a stylus input. Should we decide in the future to go for any type of hardware with a stylus or digital pen input, as it is often referred to, we would have to upgrade our existing hardware for the as a new tool of trade. Going forward, what we're looking at, we started our rollout of digital signatures, which makes it even more feasible to engage with electronic documents. So we're currently rolling that out, and we're looking at workflow and enhancing the parliamentary support functions via workflow and via exchanging documents through workflow and through a document management solution like SharePoint, which is part of the Office 365 suite. Having all those tools in the stable, it would be very convenient to conduct business electronically, both for the administration and parliamentary functions. That's the only feedback I currently have, but we are enabled in terms of software to do so. I trust Mr. Titus that elaborates on that.
Thank you. I see Mr. Titus would like to add.
Yes, Chair. In particular, with regard to the headsets, Chair, this is something that we have started looking at. It's obviously something that we've not budgeted for, so we are constrained by budget. It is a little bit of a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation with current constraints. We are looking at prioritizing and seeing where the greatest need is, and then we will be investigating all of these kinds of issues, Chairperson. I think we want a situation where, and the Honourable Mackenzie is correct, the working from home might not be easy for us, but we must also look then at what is priority in terms of seamless functioning from home. And in that regard, we are in the process of looking to whether there is a requirement for headsets among staff as well as members at this stage.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you.
Like
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, there was a question from the Chairperson regarding the protecting of the budget beyond the pandemic, and how will the institution be able to shift again post the pandemic. Maybe just Chairperson, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament currently, like the other votes within the Western Cape government, gets its funding through the provincial treasury processes. If there are then cuts or intended cuts with regards to budgets, like with the departments, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament is also requested and engaged with regards to those cuts. From our experience from the most recent cuts, is that the provincial treasury allows the Western Cape Provincial Parliament to indicate if and whether it is possible. And therefore, like the CFO has indicated, there was a thinking of 20% plus cut. From our activities and our plans, we weren't able to assist with a 20% cut, and it was a far lower percentage cut that the Western Cape Provincial Parliament was then able to provide to Treasury, and that was accepted in terms of that area. Speaker or Chairperson and honourable members, there was also a question on funds, shifting of funds. From the COVID-19 experience in 2020, from some of the savings, for example, where we had used less paper and therefore the expenditure on the purchasing of boxes of paper was then less than what it would be in an ordinary year. Those underspent / savings we were then necessitated to use for other areas. For example, if we look at the data usage by staff members who previously, when they had worked in office, they didn't require additional data. We, as a Western Cape Provincial Parliament, as the employer, we then had to amend our policies to make sure that staff are still able to function from home without having the added burden of them forking out funds from their own funds for the data that they require in terms of those areas specifically. Chairperson, there was also then the last question from Honourable Mitchell, and I'm going to ask Mr. Jawadin to respond to that, is when there will be communication to political parties regarding the allowances that would be applicable to those political parties. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. May I go ahead? I see the speaker's hands
yes,
before mine. Okay.
Just check, Mr. Speaker, would you like to make your input now or once Mr. Jawadin has concluded?
Chair, I do not know whether he will cover what I want to deal with, but he can go first and I can speak thereafter, just in case.
Great, thank you. Right, Mr. Jawadin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Speaker. Just with regards to Honourable Mitchell's question with regards to when the parties will be when the communication to the parties will be regarding the increase in the secretarial and constituency allowance. That communication normally comes by an allocation letters to the political parties signed by the Speaker towards the end of May in the new financial year. However, we do in the beginning of April, we do pay the parties a 2-month advance so that the parties do have fund for the first 2 months in the financial year until the financial statement is approved, as well as the WCPP gets the approved budget from National Parliament regarding the constituency allowances and the increase secretarial allowance is approved by the Speaker, but that's towards the end of May. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, there were two issues that I thought it's important that I just touch on. One is the issue of bursaries to the honorable members. For quite some time, we've had a heavy reliance on CPA and the entire LSS funding in terms of dealing with the capacitation of members, whether the undergrads or postgrad education. And that has somewhat been quite helpful, but it has not addressed holistically the needs of the honorable members because of the limitation of where to study and what programs can members study. So that is something that I've had sight of, and as a result requested the Deputy Speaker, whom I've delegated this authority to look at what is it that members need and what is it that we can provide within the available infrastructure of funding, and where there are gaps, then we look at that. And that brings me to the next area of the bursaries for members and policy thereof. So that is an area that resides in the ambit of the executive authority, and that is the Speaker. I have not at this stage resolved to change the policy. And this policy has been like this forever, since the dawn of this parliamentary institution. So in 2021, there has not been that much of a need. But because we have had sight, both myself and the Deputy Speaker, of some of the limitations, and we've also had members saying that, hey, Honorable Speaker, I've submitted a request, but it was turned down. But then we hear it post facto because it's an administrative matter. But those things that needs to be attended to in terms of that area, we're busy now looking at the holistic view of support to members in terms of studying. That's one. So we are going to talk about this. It's not a once-off activity that we're going to respond to here now. We are going to deal with this in the relevant platforms. Then the second issue was, again, from Honorable Mackenzie, the question, Honorable Chair, of the funding, not what this, the CFO attempted to respond to that, and I hear Mr. Chaudin is responding, but that is not the question that Honorable Mackenzie was asking. The question that the Honorable Mackenzie was asking was whether the Speaker, as he did in terms of allocating funds for members to respond to disaster challenges in their constituencies that were brought by COVID, to cook for the constituencies, to either provide sanitizers or masks and so forth and so forth. So that, Honorable Mackenzie and honorable members, through you, Chairperson, depends on how much have the political parties spent, and then we look at what is the need beyond what we have provided. So we'll talk to the party leaders about that, as we did before, and that information will then be forthcoming to the members of to the honorable members of Parliament. So I'm going to request, I've asked the Secretary now via text, Secretary, how much has been spent in this specific area? Because we don't want to declare disasters, but then members sit with the funds and not spend the funds on what we expect them to spend on. So I am dying to get feedback on this from the respective political parties represented here in Parliament, insofar as how much we have spent, honorable members, and then we're going to look at that holistically. But the 12% that the CFO was referring to, it's our commitment to the provincial fiscus, given the limitation of the MTEF in terms of the budget cuts that we had to see. So our commitment and the response as Parliament was that we are able to let go of 12%, and that is what the CFO was referring to. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are there any follow-up questions from the members? Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, thank you for that feedback. If we can also just, because we do get the newspaper scanned in every day, and I appreciate that somebody actually takes the time just to scan it in, and it must probably not an easy a job to do. But what is the state, and I knew it was going to happen at some point, now that we are on a Zoom, etc., of what happened to the e-reader? I know that there was another reader, but it wasn't as effective. And then just on the status of the bursary, and Chairperson, the reason I'm asking it, and I think I've made this point before 2 years ago, and obviously this is not the first term that this matter has been dealt with or raised, and it was raised, and I know I personally raised it at this previous speaker as well, is National Parliament pays for the bursary. There's two issues. One is a policy decision and one is funding. And I can understand if there's no money available, and that we all respect. But then the second one is a policy decision is taken, as Mr. Titus said. Because I know the Eastern Cape, because I just asked one of my colleagues now on WhatsApp as well, the Eastern Cape policies that they pay for studies, not via the LSS on a separate. And like I said, a policy decision, and one we're keen to know what was the reasons, as Mr. Titus say, for not finding it positive. If we can be provided with those reasons, then one can also understand the reasoning behind it, because it was not a funding decision, it was a policy decision. Then obviously one can discuss the funding. Thank you.
Are there any final follow-up questions from any other member? Mr. Speaker, I see your hand.
It's inadvertently up, Chairperson. I'll just draw it. I'll just withdraw it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, I'm not sure if you're able to respond to those final questions, please.
Chairperson, I'm going to ask Mr. Titus maybe just first to respond, and then as usual, just augment if necessary.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think the Honourable Speaker was very clear in the response that the current policy that we have and the policy decision around that is something that has been long-standing within the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And part of the policy discourse, I think, that underpins this particular decision has been the fact that the manner in which members of Parliament, for instance, just as an example, are deployed within on behalf of political parties are very different to how staff members, for instance, within the organization are employed. If I can just draw a comparison, just for the sake of the meeting, just as by means of an example, staff who are getting current assistance, where there is they sign a particular contract, a contract of commitment, and where they are not able to upkeep the commitment, the administration take the financial or make an arrangement in terms of redeeming or getting the monies back from that particular individual who has been errant in completing the studies. Because it is an investment and it's financial investment that we're talking about. It is slightly different with members. Firstly, the policy does not allow it, but secondly, the thinking around is that political or members of Parliament are deployed to where a political party deem their skills most effective and most appropriate. And when members are in a contract with the WCPP with regard to their long-term studies, and they are deployed elsewhere, the risk of not getting the particular monies back that has been committed and that has been invested is a far greater kind of risk. But as the Speaker had indicated, this is a matter for policy discussion. That has just been some of the financial risks that are underpinned by long-term provision of bursary support for members.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. I'm not sure if the Secretary or Speaker have anything further to add.
Chairperson, I'm covered with Mr. Titus's response, but maybe just to add, like Mr. Titus has indicated, in when bursaries are allocated, there's usually a financial, but also a service commitment. Because honourable members are not employees of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, there would also always be a question mark regarding the issue of service commitment, considering things could change as quickly as what things could change. The other matter also is that from a recent perusal of what I think it was in one of the speakers forum meetings, what does the budgets look like and what do the staffing arrangements look like in the provincial parliaments and national parliament? It was clear, Chairperson, that the Western Cape Provincial Parliament has the smallest budget in the country as it relates to the legislatures and parliament specifically, and therefore the availability of funding should also be a key consideration when these type of policy decisions are being considered and made. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I'm going to reiterate on the point that I've made earlier. Myself and the Deputy Speaker, fortunately, we were the honourable members, backbenchers, before the DS became minister, and obviously before I became speaker and before you became chief whip. So we know exactly what the issues are that affect the honourable members. And one will not assume that I know everything that the members are confronted with. But most of the challenges we are quite aware with. We're quite, aware. And as a result of that, we have taken a decision to look at this whole thing of education and funding there too. There are certain changes that we'll be bringing forth. One of which is the best way to accommodate funding support in terms of what members want to study outside what is given as a basket to either VETS, the VETS program, or UJ. But members may want to do something online with an abroad university, or they might want to do something online with a local university or attend in person. But we have to make that decision based on everything else that we look at that is currently available. So it's not something that is far from being presented to the members. And of course, let us not, I'm going to say this carefully, let us not push harder now, because there is a risk of us having to say things that we should not be saying. We don't want to say here now, yes, it is done, Honorable Mackenzie, through you, Chairperson. But I can tell you now that we know the frustrations. It has been extremely frustrating. I remember even the Deputy Speaker once wanted to do something with a university, but the policy, when she was an ordinary member at the time, she was the chair of a committee, it said, no, you can't. Honorable Batman wanted to do something, they said, you can't. It is not the administration. They are implementing the policy that has been in this institution for as long as this parliament has been here. So I'm looking at amending the policy, but within the available structure of what we can afford as parliament. So I hope I'm making sense, Chair. I'm not going to speak further on this point, and I hope that the honourable members will not ask more questions on this point, because that is what currently exists, but we are responding to it, and I can assure you that we will do so soon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for those inputs. I take it then that we've concluded our deliberations on these two reports, unless there are any additional comments or questions. None? All right, then let's move on to the final item on our agenda, 3.3. I'll just ask the Secretary if he confirm whether any instructions have been issued by the Speaker in terms of Section 37.6 and Section 66.2 of the FAMPLA.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I can confirm that as at today, the 9th of March in the year 2021, at 10:30 in the morning, There has been no instructions issued by the Speaker as it relates to Section 37.6 and Section 66.2 of FAMPLA. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We will note that in our committee report. On that note, then, I'd like to thank the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, you, Mr. Secretary, as well as the CFO and the management team of the WCPP for engaging with us this morning and answering our questions. And thank you very much also for preparing those presentations on the performance and financial information. If there are any concluding remarks, Mr. Speaker.
Chairperson, I just want to thank you and the honorable members in the committee, and of course, thank the Secretary, thank the Deputy Speaker, thanks to the Secretary, the Office of the Speaker, the senior management team, and all employees of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. We really committed to continuously engaging with you and providing the kind of responses that will assist the members to do quality oversight over the affairs of this Parliament. Thank you very much and have a lovely day further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, any comments from you?
No, thank you very much. I think the Speaker has put it very succinctly, and yes, just wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Chairperson. Nothing from my side. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Super. Thank you very much to you all. Also wishing you a very good day further. The committee will remain behind to conduct our committee business. So the WCPP delegation is welcome to leave the meeting at this stage. All right, members, let's move on to the rest of our agenda. First, let's consider the draft committee meetings of, no, sorry, I beg your pardon. Before we do that, can we please have a look at our draft committee report for today's meeting?
There we go, Chair. I'm just sharing it.
Okay. Can all members see that?
Just make it a little bit bigger, Chair. Yeah. Can the members see it now?
Yeah, maybe make it a little bit bigger.
Okay, no problem.
Great. Okay, I'm going to read it out loud for the Hansard. Draft report of the Parliamentary Oversight Committee, having considered the quarterly financial and performance information for the second and third quarters of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, WCPP, for the 2020-21 financial year, 9th of March 2021 as follows. The Parliamentary Oversight Committee reports that it convened on the 9th of March 2021 and has concluded its deliberations on the quarterly financial and performance information for the second and third quarters of the WCPP for the 2020-2021 financial year, which was referred to it in terms of Standing Rule 89.1. The committee interrogated the WCPP in terms of the information that was tabled and referred to the committee as legislated under Section 17.2a of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act of 2009. In accordance with Section 37.6 and 66.2 of the FAMPLA, the WCPP reported to the committee that no instructions were issued for the second and third quarters of the 2020-2021 financial year. Are there any edits or amendments? Can we accept this draft committee report as put up on the screen?
That's fine, Chairperson.
I would second, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. Thank you, Honourable Allen. We will then adopt it and convert it into the committee report.
That's correct, Chairperson. I'll just take that off. Thank you, Chair. Let me just load the...
Mr. Davids, is that in order?
Yes, no, Chairperson. That's fine, Chairperson. Chair, is it fine if I can just load the minutes of the 4th of February for your attention, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I'm just sharing it quickly, Chair.
And while you do that, are there, can we just have a look at, before we move on to the minutes, any resolutions or requests for information based on today's meeting? I know there was a request from Honourable Mackenzie, if I recall, one or two from you, Honourable Mackenzie. Do you want to table those now?
Yes, Chairperson. The one is around the conference, just the list of those conferences. Was either from CPA or for CWP. Yeah.
Could we perhaps extend it to all international partners?
That's fine. Yes. Yeah, that's fine.
So the question will then be, what are the what conferences has the WCPP been invited to by its international partners, and which delegates attended in these virtual meetings? Something, is that what you were?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Did I capture that correctly?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And did you have another one?
The second one, and I heard the speaker say that he's going to provide really look at that policy, so I'll leave the second one of the study policy. He indicated that he's busily looking at that. Yeah.
Then I recall Honourable Mitchell also had one. Honourable Mitchell.
Apologies, Chair. I don't know, for some reason my image looked different now, so I couldn't find the unmute button. Chair, I would like to ask that we be provided with a copy of the rollout plan for the constituency program as presented by Ms. Fushia.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Davids, do you have that?
Got it, Chairperson.
Super.
Chairperson.
Honourable Mackenzie.
Yes, sorry, that was the other one. Not only the rollout plan, also the program. What are they teaching? Or what are what is the public outreach officer presenting to the community? So there's the plan where they're going. She mentioned districts, etc. But what are they actually presenting?
Okay, so the details of the program.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Any other requests for information or recommendations? None? Okay, super. We have that captured. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Then we'll move on to the minutes of the 4th of February. It is beamed up on your screen here. We have attendance. Let's move down to page 2. Very short set of minutes. It was the consideration adoption of the draft committee report of the annual report. Can we adopt these minutes, please?
That's fine.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell, for proposing. Could I have a seconder, please?
Honourable Mackenzie.
You can't propose and second.
Because you said Mitchell, that's why.
I'm sorry, apologies.
I would second, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. It's all the M's. Okay, super. I think then that is the business of the day. Mr. Davids, have I neglected anything?
No, Chairperson, everything is up to date. You haven't neglected anything, Chair.
Great. I will then see all of you in the budget deliberations. Let's just check the date. Bear with me one moment. On the 18th of March.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, members, and thank you to Mr. Davids for your assistance in making the meeting run very smoothly. Have a good day further. The meeting is adjourned.